today we will be talking with three very important people at the center who've been with it for years. Barbara Anderson, professor of sociology. She came to the University of Michigan in 1984. Zvi Gitelman, he is professor of political science and came to the University of Michigan in 1968. And John Fine, professor of history, he came to the University of Michigan in 1969. Welcome. And we'll just say that I'm Olga Virakhovskaya and I'm a proud graduate of the center, 1996. So we will start from the beginning, from the early years. Zvi, John, you came to the center when just a few years or even the next year after the center became the Center for Russian and East European Studies to recognize the university's commitment to the region. What do you remember about those years?
Remember it? Well, see, Bornstein was the director at the time, and he was a very, very active figure, and all kinds of projects going on, and it was very. We had lots of activities. We had the same brown bags we have now. Lots of lecture series, and possibilities of going abroad, and lots of grant money for the students, graduate students, and as well as for us for research in the summers. It was a very lively place.
I agree. When I came for my interview at the political science department, I spent some time with Morris, who was then the very efficient, that goes without saying, director of the center. Darlene Breitner was pegging away at a manual typewriter. It was in Lane Hall, which was a decrepit, but much more charming building than this, I must say. We had brown bags, as John mentioned, every Wednesday, and there was a rather predictable crowd, half of which didn't seem to be affiliated with the university, but was interested in the region. I particularly remember two categories of people. One were the celery chompers, and the other were the carrot crunchers. And they would predictably provide background noise for whoever the speaker was. But it was a rather engaged group. I had the luck, maybe, of arriving in September of '68, approximately 3 weeks after the invasion of Czechoslovakia by the Soviet Union and 5 of its allies. And East European studies, or at least East European politics, had not been taught yet at the university. I didn't know what to expect. Probably they didn't know what to expect. And conveniently enough, this invasion took place. Not convenient for the Czechs, but enrollment was very large. And I learned that academia follows the flag, which explains many of the trends, let's say, since 1991. And that was a very exciting time. In the first years that we were here, the survey courses were introduced, and I thought that was a major step in exposing students who would not specialize in the region to many aspects of the region. So first it was what was called 395, later became 595, God knows what it is today. The survey of the Soviet Union, and then
I think it's back to 395.
Oh, good. Well, that's where it should be. And then we had 396, which was the survey of Eastern Europe. So these were exciting times, and we were one of several burgeoning centers around the country. The Russian Institute at Columbia and the Harvard Russian Research Center were the first two, and then Berkeley and Ohio State and Michigan and several others were in the game, and there we were.
Interesting. Going almost 15 years forward, Barbara, you came in 1984. What was the center like at the time?
I wanted to say something about that. I came to Michigan from a tenured position at Brown, and CREES was one of the main reasons I came here. I've never regretted that. And at that time, it was in the middle of the Cold War, and I'd done work on the Russian Empire and the Soviet Union, and I'm a sociologist demographer, and I saw the Russian Empire and the Soviet Union as arenas to test mainline social scientific hypotheses and not to treat them like the moon. Now, at that time, that was a pretty radical point of view in the study of this region. And a couple of things attracted me about Michigan and CREES. One was, at that time, most Russian East European Studies centers were quite ideological, and were quite ideologically right-wing. And CREES wasn't left-wing, it wasn't right-wing, it was just scholarly, which I thought was incredibly unusual and admirable. Another thing was, when I was teaching at Brown, students would come to public talks I gave, and they'd come to ask me about what they could read, and I give them some stuff in English. And they'd say, well, how do we work on the kinds of things you work on? And I'd say, do you read Russian? And they'd say no, and I said, well, I'm sorry, it's really not possible. And I thought that I'd be able to find here students with language and area knowledge, social science-oriented students with quantitative aptitude. Graduate students would be good, and this was phenomenally successful. And so I did not regret this at all.